Well, I think Collaborate Real Estate Group and just the formation of that property management company for me is definitely, so far at least, knock on wood, the highlight of my career. It's always been my dream since I got into property management, and really even since I was in food service, is to own and operate my own company.
Well, it's been amazing to see how well it's gone so quickly. Well, Scott, we get to turn the tables around on this one and kick off with you as the first guest on your own podcast. Lunch is on you, I guess, as opposed to on me. But yeah, as a way of just introducing you to the audience, maybe you could start with who you are, what you do, the context of you coming into this.
Sure. Yeah. Scott King, currently the founder and CEO of a new company that we launched in 25 called Collaborate Real Estate Group. And we focus on single family property management. That's our main focus. On top of that, I also have a couple of different real estate funds that I've put together and manage. Along with, I work a little bit in the music industry as well as the director of safety and security for a local Memphis company called Mempho Presents. And we do large scale music festivals here in the city and help coordinate with some other events around town. And so, yeah, those are the things that I'm up to today.
Yeah. Well, I've learned a lot from you over the years about real estate, managing assets, thinking about investing. And so I'm excited for the audience to get more of that, from you. I'm curious, why do this show? What was the inspiration for wanting to do this?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, Lunch is on Me is a concept that came from my mother at a young age. And the idea that she instilled in me was that when you see someone that is successful, or you see someone that possesses something that you think you may want, whether that be material things, whether it be success in business, whether it be success in their personal life and just their general way of being, instead of trying to take from that person information, offer to take them to lunch and sit down with them and get the information that you need, but from a place of giving them something and them giving you something in return. So the idea of the Lunch is on Me podcast is very much based in that initial idea that she had given me as a child. And I've used that as a young adult and throughout my career, and even to this day where I take people out to lunch, sit down with them and just really try to understand their story and get the information that I want through giving them a meal and getting the information back.
Yeah, I love that because most people, when they think about networking, they think about who can I meet, what can I get out of this, et cetera. But starting from a place of, hey, let me take a first step of generosity. And I've just noticed that about you, that you build great relationships, and it's a big part of how you've gotten where you are and accomplished everything that you've accomplished. Scott, if we were to take back people just getting to know you a little bit better, before you got into the role you're in now as business owner, running funds, Mempho, everything that you're doing there, what would you kind of describe about your career progression, of how you got into real estate, how you got into entrepreneurship?
Yeah, so it really, my original background in the career path that I was on was in the food service industry. So from high school on till about the age of 30-ish, I worked in food service, and that was everything. I mean, I started washing dishes when I was young and then moved up in the restaurant business to where I was managing kitchens and managing restaurants towards the end of that career. I quickly noticed that in that line of work, that the amount of hours that you put in versus the return that you get for those hours was not evenly balanced. A lot of times in the food service industry, you're working 16-hour days, 6 to 7 days a week. You're working every holiday. And the retirement plans on those types of jobs aren't necessarily set up for great success later on in life. And so it was around 2010. My son, Chandler, who's now 15, my wife at the time was pregnant with him. And I was working at a restaurant, and it was really kind of a pivotal moment for me because I really needed to make the decision at that time on whether or not I was going to basically go into ownership of restaurants, and that was the path I was going to take, or I needed to pivot into something else to where the work-life balance would be a little bit more manageable. And so in 2010, I had a friend here locally in Memphis who had a small property management company. He was merging with another company that was going to be a larger company and needed someone to come on and help him with leasing. I knew a little bit about real estate at the time because in 2008, I actually purchased my first rental property. Had no idea what I was doing or why I was doing it, but it seemed like a good idea at the time. This was about 60 days, 90 days before the crash in 2008. So we purchased a duplex in Senatobia, Mississippi, knowing nothing about property management, knowing nothing about owning rental property. And 90 days later, the purchase that we made was worth about 50% of what we actually spent on it. So
off to a hot start.
Off to a hot start, but it was actually one of really an early lesson that stayed with me till today, because what I realized during that time was it was a duplex. And so one side occupied handled the mortgage, the taxes, and the insurance. And then when the other side was rented, that was just cash flow on the property. And so even though there was all this noise in the real estate world about values going down, I wasn't necessarily worried about the value of the property because I wasn't trying to sell it. And I looked at it like, hey, this duplex is one day going to set me up for some type of retirement, especially if I can add on to it. And so what I knew from the numbers that one side occupied and one side rented, I paid all the bills and I cash flowed. And I still own that duplex to this day. And the value has gone back up to more than what we paid for it initially. In fact, we've paid that property off. But so, a lot of times when I'm talking to real estate investors about strategy and things like that, I try to talk to them about a long-term vision and long-term holds for real estate, not the get rich quick overnight strategies.
Yeah.
So, so in 2010, I started I knew a little bit about real estate because I owned an investment property, but I knew nothing about property management itself. But I started leasing properties, and I would work during the day as a leasing agent, and then at night I would go into the restaurant and wait tables. And I did that for about 6 to 9 months until it got to a point where going into work at the restaurant at night and not answering my phone for the leasing calls was costing me more money than it would be to do the leasing full time. And at that point is when I transitioned into doing property management full time.
Something that strikes me about you, Scott, like your background is like coming up in the food industry, which is a challenging, competitive, service industry, and property management being a service business in a lot of ways, like operationally and logistically intensive. There's a lot of coordination of vendors, everything else, but then you also started to develop this skill set of being, an investor, right, directly, and understanding, how do I want to allocate capital and what are the bets, right, that I'm making, and looking at things macro, looking at things micro, and it sounds like a lot of those lessons learned along the way, but really bringing those two things together has kind of allowed you to do what you've done and help a lot of other people kind of in their journey connected to real estate. How do you kind of think about, the skill set that you're bringing that's kind of unique in what you're doing with Collaborate and what you're doing with your funds?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting to touch on that because I think a lot of people in the property management lose sight of the fact that we are a service industry. And so that's why I love hiring people that have a food service background or a hotel background. I may be a little biased in that as well, but people who can survive in the restaurant business can often survive in the chaos that property management can be. Mm-hmm. But I think from a fundamental standpoint, when you treat a property management company as a service company, you have a client and a customer. Our client is the homeowner, the property owner, the investor, and our customer is the resident who lives in that home. And these are the two people that we have to serve the best possible way that we can. And so just taking those kind of fundamentals that I learned in the food service industry of customer service and, treating every guest that comes into the restaurant with the respect that they deserve, I think translates really well into the service side of the industry of property management.
Mm. So. Yeah, and I think that's great. When there's like a hospitality aspect of providing great service, right, that can be really challenging, especially in property management where it hits so personal and so close to home for a lot of people. If something's leaking or not going right or whatever it might be, it can be an emotional business or kind of a challenging context to work through.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I think a lot of companies focus too much sometimes on the owner experience and not the resident experience. Mm. And you have to have a good mix of both of those things. One hand always washes the other. So, if you've got a resident who's having a bad experience in a home, ultimately that owner is going to suffer because they're going to be not in the home as long. They're not going to be as happy. They're going to leave bad reviews, whatever it is. And so, it's really important to try to nail both of those down as best as possible.
And this episode's about you, but I was providing folks some context of the company I work with. We work with over 3,000 management companies all across the U.S. and Collaborate, we're excited to partner with because it's one of the fastest growing, businesses that we work with, and already has such a great reputation. What do you think is it about Collaborate and like how you guys do business that's really contributing to that rapid rate of growth and the high degree of trust, right, you guys are building with clients?
I think we're operators at heart. And everybody who works for the company has a background in operations. I think one of the best things that I could have done, I tend to be a very impatient person. And, I definitely have a vision for the company and I want the company to grow and I want rapid growth and success and all of those things. But I've been very patient with the process. I was in the corporate side of property management from 2010 up until January of 2025, basically, when we launched Collaborate Real Estate Group. And, through that built the fundamentals needed to be able to go out and open something that I felt strongly we could provide that best level of service for our investors and for our residents. And so I think that's what really sets us apart from the other companies is that we're operators at heart. We have a service first mentality. We all are experts in our field of work with what we do within the organization. And so I believe that's really what sets any company up to be successful in the field that they're in.
Okay, so we've talked a little bit about what makes you guys great in real estate, what you're passionate about there. Let's talk about Minfo for a minute and your connection to music, the music industry. How did this get started? What kind of ignited your passion and interest in that direction?
So from a young age, my brother was a huge music fan. He's about 6 years older than I am. So, I grew up listening to Led Zeppelin and the Beatles and the Grateful Dead and all these types of kind of 60s, 70s rock artists that really kind of defined rock and roll. And I got very into live music at a young age. So music is something that's always been very close to me, very close to my heart. I've traveled around the country seeing different bands. I've worked for some different bands. And then my connection with Memphis actually came through lunch. So, a buddy of mine who I hope to have on the podcast one day, him and I actually worked together at a restaurant in the food service industry probably about 20 years ago. And he was working for a band at the time. I was working for a band at the time. We were also both working at the restaurant. And his career progressed on the music side, and I went to do some different things. But him and I stayed touch through that 20 years, and it was always my intention to take him out to lunch about once a year, at least once every other year, to just keep that connection for us going. And it took many, many years, but eventually we went to a lunch together, and he had just started doing Memphis Music Festival and needed somebody to come in and help with the one weekend a year that they were doing that event. And that was about 6 or 7 years ago. And since then, that role and my involvement in that organization has increased year over year. And again, that all comes back to taking somebody to lunch.
I did not know that about the lunch and how that sparked that. That's really cool. And so my curiosity, Scott, naturally goes to you're running a business. Again, you got funds, you've got dozens of investment properties yourself. You've got Minfo, which continues to expand and grow each year, and your contribution to it. Chandler's grown into a wonderful young man, and you got a lot going on. I think a lot of people, at least I'm curious, how do you kind of manage all that? Where you're really advancing multiple things kind of at once in your life in a way that feels energizing and sustainable?
That's a very fair question. I think a lot of that just comes back from kind of growing up in the food service industry. That is very much chaotic. And I think some people might look at all of the things that I'm involved in today and say that that's a little chaotic, right? But I thrive in chaos. And so, but it's also just in being highly organized. It's one of the things that I realized super early on is that your amount of organizational skills that you have and can bring to the table are going to help kind of how you navigate through these different things. And so early on in my property management career, I was doing leasing, I was doing project management, I was doing owner relations, I was touching a lot of different aspects of the business. And you just have to be highly organized. And so I try to have that translate into my life today. I try to stay very organized. I have task lists. I have a very built out calendar and very organized calendar. And that kind of helps me to be able to stay on track. That and time management, which I think goes directly into the organizational aspect of it as well. Time is the most valuable commodity that we have. And I truly, truly believe that. And so I try to use time in my favor as much as possible. And I try to ensure that whether it's my time or somebody else's time, that I'm maximizing that as much as possible so that we can get the highest value out of it. And then we can move on to the next thing.
It's so interesting because like we've known each other for years, but as you're saying this, like it's dawning on me that like I observe this about you, that you have a very high respect for time. Like you're one of the more punctual people that I know. I can tell that you're conscious of it. Not in a way that feels annoying to somebody who's probably less punctual or wouldn't be accused of that in the same way. But I do observe that about you. Like you're very organized, diligent, like details do not slip. And you're a very high integrity person with your commitments. And so you don't make them lightly, but when you do make them, like you go all in, and it drives a lot of momentum, right, that you've got across different things. That's cool to think about that
Yeah,
way.
for sure. Look, I think my math may be wrong, but I think it's right. But there are 8,760 hours in a year. And I break down every hour, right, to see, where is the value in that hour. And so I think when you look at it like that, just from even what is my time worth? What am I spending doing? What am I spending my hours focused on? I think when you look at it broken down like that, that's a really great way to do that.
Yeah, just being very intentional, planned, and thoughtful, right, with your time. So Scott, something I'd love to take a moment for is what can we celebrate right now? What's a win that's recent that's exciting for you?
Well, I think Collaborate Real Estate Group and just the formation of that property management company for me is definitely, so far at least, knock on wood, the highlight of my career. It's always been my dream since I got into property management, and really even since I was in food service, is to own and operate my own company. And so getting that off the ground, having employees, having an office, having a setup to where we can really go out there and do the best that we can do, I think for me is the biggest win so far.
Yeah. It's been amazing to see how well it's gone so quickly. But it's really a testament to all the experience, I guess, you've had going into it to help with that. If I could take things a different direction, Scott, just people getting to know you a little bit more personally, what do you like to do in your free time? Like when you're not, when you're not building your business, right, or making an impact in your community, right, directly in what you're doing with Minfo. What do people find you doing?
I like to go eat with Andrew Smallwood as much as possible. So
we've had some memorable meals. What's your favorite meal that we've had?
Oh man, that's really, really tough. Alinea, rooftop Alinea in Chicago is definitely up there. That was just an incredible experience. Unfortunately, it was during COVID, so it was a little bit different than their normal seating. But that's one of the best. And I think for me personally, I love traveling. Traveling is definitely a passion of mine when I have the time to do it. And food plays a huge role in that because I'm always seeking out those unique experiences anywhere that I go and trying to incorporate the food experience into that as well.
Okay, so from that Alinea meal, what was your favorite moment from that meal?
And that's easy because I think about this a lot, which is a little weird, I guess. But I remember they had a sweet corn ice cream cone. And it was just like a normal ice cream cone, and it had this sweet corn gelato or something on the top of it. And I remember thinking to myself, like, this just doesn't, corn and ice cream, I don't get it.
Yeah.
And then when I ate it, I was like, oh yeah, I really get it. I really get it.
Yeah. There was also like a watermelon that was like grilled or something. It was really cool how they made something and you're like, that seems like it's not going to work.
I think they buried that watermelon in the ground for like 6 months or something.
Oh my gosh.
It was something like that.
Yeah.
It was like a buried watermelon, and it did not look like watermelon at all.
Yeah.
But I think it came out and it tasted like a fatty tuna or something. It was like
Yeah.
such a unique experience to eat that.
The consistency was different than you expected. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. That was memorable. Okay, I got to ask you one more food question, which is when you think about one of your most memorable lunches you've had, and we take Andrew Smallwood off the table. And you already talked earlier about how Minfo that got started with lunch, but when you think about some of your most memorable lunches, is there a story that comes to mind for you?
I mean, off the top of my head with that, as I've mentioned, a lot of the success that I have today has come from lunch, including the real estate funds that I've started. That all came through a lunch that I had with an individual. And so those, and not the initial lunch. You know, you don't go to lunch with someone and, you know, all of a sudden they're writing you a check for $10 million. You know,
Sure.
that's not how that goes. But starting those lunches and starting that conversation and building on those relationships has been really what set the foundation for everything and where I am today. And so as far as memorable lunch, I mean, that's where I would go with that, is that, you know, it's part of the concept too, where you've got to hear a lot of no's before you hear a yes. And it's really, really important to not get discouraged by the no's. And I had to have 50 lunches with other people to pitch ideas and to talk about things and to talk about businesses and to talk about real estate funds before I ever got to that one lunch that actually wrote the check. And so you've got to persevere through that. You've got to get through the no's to get to that yeah.
So Scott, I really enjoyed this conversation. I'd love to ask, what's a question you wish I'd asked you?
Oh, wow. That's a great question there. What band did I go follow around the country
There we
for
go.
years early in my music career?
You did talk about travel earlier, and I got sidelined on the food a little bit. Yeah, maybe you could talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so look, I'm a huge Fish fan, and I went on a Fish tour when I was in my late teens, and it was certainly just such a great experience to kind of be on the road and travel from city to city, following this band around. And while it may have not been the most productive time ever, it was certainly a good time. And, taking that experience and just, kind of being able to look back on those days now is, it's quite the journey from, the days in the parking lot of a Fish show to what that looks like today. So.
Well, it is amazing how far you've come and yet stayed true to your passion and your interest through it all. I really enjoyed the conversation.
Man, thank you so much for doing this. I really, really appreciate it.
Absolutely.